Okay, and we are back with another episode of Leadership Lessons. I'm your host, Mr. Keshav Bhatt, and I'm here today with Dr. Helena Wright, who is a climate change researcher and works at E013, an independent climate change think tank. Today we're going to be talking about climate change. How worried should you be? But before we go into the episode, we have a special prize for you guys. So if you want to be in with a chance of winning, make sure you are a subscriber and you comment at the bottom of this video, and you'll be entered automatically into that prize draw. So do you want to tell us, first of all, what is the prize?
Yeah, so the prize is actually some support with your CV. So if there's anyone out there who's interested in working in the environmental sector, get in touch and I'll be happy to help advise on how you can improve your CV.
And I'm going to actually add on to your offer. So if there's anyone out there who maybe you're not interested in that particular sector, but you do want help with your career or with your CV, I will spend 10 to 15 minutes on a call one-to-one with you. If you're in London, you can come see me in King's Cross and we'll help you with whatever issue you're having. Or, if you want to do a bit of interview practice or you want us to look over your CV, myself and Lewis, if he's there, will do that for you. But make sure you subscribe and you comment down below. Without further ado though, let's get into the episode. And we are going to start with thanks for the cut. So do you have one ready? Because I know I've got a really good one that I want to share, but I want to start with yourself. So yeah. Thanks for the cut, as you guys know, is our opportunity to celebrate our failures and to learn from them, because often we try and hide away, and there is a lot of this culture in a lot of corporate environments and a lot of schools and a lot of families of a lot of shame around making a mistake, and we therefore implicitly make it not okay to ever mess up. But we're human, and the most important thing is, as we've mentioned before, is realizing that you're a diamond. Whichever way you might get cut, it's all part of the process, that you start as a piece of coal, but it's after years and years of pressure and heat and everything else that you turn into a diamond. So Helena, do you have a thanks for the cut?
Yeah, I have a kind of mistake I made in my previous job, which was basically that I was typing too much and literally got repetitive strain injury in my wrist, and then I had to take 2 weeks off. And it was really, really painful. I don't recommend it to anybody. So yeah.
How did you rectify that? Obviously, you had some.
I just had to rest
wrist support,
and
I suppose,
have some physio and stuff.
What helped you afterwards to make sure that it didn't happen again?
It's just made me realise it's really important to take care of yourself, not to work too hard, even if you're really passionate about an issue. Just make sure you look after number one, because otherwise you might have to take time out to get better.
And actually, you've probably found this in your line of work. Climate change is such a big issue that we're going to get into today why it's so important. But it's really hard to stop. and go home at 6-7 o'clock.
Yeah.
What's been helpful for you to kind of know that balance?
Yeah, I think you just have to give yourself regular working hours, even if your job has slightly unusual hours, like different time zones.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Just force yourself to take a break, like even if you really, really care about something, I would recommend.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really, I think that's a common one. Like, it's something that one thing that I found useful, just to add on to that actually, is when you use a mouse, instead of buying the normal ones, you can actually get an ergonomic neutral mouse, which you kind of hold like this. There's a really good one by Anker. If you go and check it out on Amazon, it costs like 12 quid. That I'd really, really recommend. And it looks really cool, so it's a good conversation starter. My thanks for the cut is kind of different. So I recently read a book that we gave away, and well done to the giveaway prize winner. It's been sent out to you. Make sure you send me a picture of that. I haven't actually received it yet. So I did a test based on this book called Strengths Finder. So you do a 20-minute survey which asks you a bunch of different questions. And what happens is, very early on in the test, you're asked to pick whether you're one thing or another, to kind of see which tendency you have. And it's all about looking at what are your strengths and doubling down on that. And as I went through, it started to pick more and more of the ones that I'd chosen and put them against each other. So if I picked, what's more important, success or empowering people, and I'd pick empowering people, and then it would take that one and put it against another one that I'd chosen. And eventually it got to a point where it asked the question, what would you say is more important, achieving your goals or the journey? And just in, I guess, answering those questions, it told me something about myself, that and you only had 20 seconds to pick an answer so that you're giving like your gut reaction. And then as I went further along, another question came up, which was, are you the kind of person who focuses on improving on their weaknesses or celebrating their strengths? And there were a few questions quite similar to this. Are you a person that likes solving problems or kind of backtracking from solutions and seeing how stuff works? And I 9 times out of 10 went for the improvements and looking at problems. And what that helped me to realize about myself was that, because I'm also, another question that they asked was, do you love learning or do you love presenting or teaching? And I love learning. And because I'm so geared towards that, what I realized was, and that was my thanks for the cut, I guess, was that because I'm so focused on improving and building on my weaknesses, I'm actually quite often not giving as much attention and focus to celebrating the strengths and noticing those, because they're there every single day and you do take them for granted. So that was my thanks for the cut there, was to actually spend more time realizing like I'm very gifted in a lot of areas already, and making sure that I don't lose sight of those things, because it's very easy and it's very good, obviously, to work on your weaknesses and want to improve and want to learn, but it's also important not to forget the things that you're great in. And I know there's particular really close friends that tell me all the time, and I'm sure that one of them in particular is probably watching and saying, I've been telling you that this whole time. But the Strength Finder test really kind of helped me to understand that. But let's get on to the main meaty topic, to use the pun, for the later question of the show, and that's, how worried should we be about climate change?
Yeah, I think we should be really worried about climate change, to be honest. But it's important not to lose hope. But at the same time, we need to really realise the quite severe impacts that are happening already. One of the things that I'm really worried about is coral reefs, because even with the pledges that countries have agreed to under the UN, that won't actually be enough to save most of the world's coral reefs. And 25% of the world's fishes actually rely on coral reefs. So that's a huge chunk of fishes that won't be around because their habitat will be lost. And already in many places we're seeing the coral reefs completely wiped out and bleached. For instance, the Great Barrier Reef, which is really, really sad. And another thing that I'm really, really concerned about in terms of climate change is certain areas of the world might actually become uninhabitable. So parts of South Asia, Middle East, but by the middle part of this century, we might find extreme heat waves and people will probably have to move.
There was a report that I read just this week that talked about the death toll that we can expect as a result of the temperatures rising. Just before in the episode previously, our guest was talking about, I think it was 2,300 people, she said, if I remember correctly, died in India because of a heat wave as a result of climate change. And that link between actually those issues are so interconnected of poverty in India, but also climate change, and it exacerbates them. And often the countries that are contributing the least to climate change are the ones who are suffering the most.
Yeah, and it's the same with like the most vulnerable people being affected as well in those countries, like the elderly, the children. They're more impacted by things like heat waves or increases in disease. So it's causing a lot of inequality, or it will cause inequality.
And what are some of the I guess climate change research is your day-to-day. You've advised governments and worked with all kinds of influential people, so there's an academic basis behind it. Why do you think there still is a small minority who are very loud, I think, that are still denying the existence of climate change and kind of resisting it when it's so urgent and literally people are dying because of it?
Unfortunately, there is interest involved and there's business interests involved. So the necessary transition means we need to shift away from fossil fuels. And you can see in America, a lot of the groups that are basically denying the science of climate change are actually funded by fossil fuel interests. So they're trying to distort the science. They're trying to pay for so-called scientific articles that actually aren't scientific at all. So that's where a lot of this is coming from.
So when you say they're not scientific, what do you mean by that? Is it a case of confirmation bias and trying to look for the answer?
There's reports that have been funded, and in the United States there's a lot of industry bodies that have been funding them, and it looks like it's scientific, but it's a report that's completely false information, and basically they're using that to try and make people doubt the science of climate change. It's like what happened in the tobacco industry, actually.
Tell me more about that, because I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so it was probably like in the 1980s, the tobacco industry was trying to fund a lot of science that said smoking's not bad for you, basically. Eventually, they got caught out and people wised up to the fact that smoking is bad for you. But it's a similar thing has been happening with climate change.
And it's interesting because I think, something like that, in the UK we have very clear labeling now of smoking is bad for you, and it's an accepted fact. And growing up, that's always been the norm for me. So we forget that actually there were huge bodies and collaborations going on for self-interest to make more money and keep the privilege where it is, to make us believe something different. There was a really good point that I guess made in the last episode, that we need to stop producing that colonial logic and kind of free ourselves from it. So that's a really, really interesting one there that you brought up. I know that, for example, with the beauty industry as well, they actually ran campaigns in the 1930s and 40s to convince women that they smelled so that they would buy deodorant.
Yeah.
So before that, there wasn't actually an industry there. So, a couple of things that you were talking about before we actually started filming as well that I wanted to kind of bring up was, you talked about hope. I think, it's important to approach this conversation with hope and be solution focused. Yeah. What are some of the exciting innovations and I guess voices right now in this space that you feel are contributing really, really well and that people should pay attention to?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of the innovation, particularly on solar technology. There's loads of really exciting stuff going on in the world, and solar prices have fallen really dramatically. For example, in India, solar is actually cheaper now than coal in many places. And there's new technologies that are coming out all the time, like solar on glass panels. And if that comes to market, that would be amazing, because you can imagine...
So literally like the glass that we've got
straight
through, you can see through it.
The whole glass buildings, you could have them covered with solar. And there's now solar
is that getting close
tiles.
to mass market yet, or is that still in development?
I think that's still in development. Okay. Like, it's not quite there yet, but we will see that eventually. And really those kind of cutting edge new technologies can really help.
There's a really exciting organisation in the UK that I saw a few years ago called PaveGen. Don't know if you've ever heard of them, and it's effectively that they make the tiles that you have on the floor.
Yeah.
When you step on it, it uses the kinetic energy to generate more electricity.
Actually, I was reading about that this morning. They're thinking that, in big stations, they could have those kind of flooring
because the amount
everywhere.
of footfall and traffic we're getting.
So as people are commuting to work, they're actually generating energy.
Yeah. And then you got people like me who are doing step count. I'll just step on that and start walking around all day and generate electricity. The other question that I had on this was, there's a lot of talk about, I guess, a D-Day period or a point at which of no return. How close are we to that? And have we gone past it? If so, what can we do? Like, where are we in relation to that right now?
Yeah, it's kind of uncertain. I'd say that's why I mentioned coral reefs. Like, for that, we're probably really near to that point where the coral reefs won't be able to survive. They won't regenerate. And when it comes to also ice melting in the Arctic as well, there could be a tipping point at which, so much ice is melted, it's not able to reform.
Okay.
But it's really quite uncertain where those points are. We just have to be aware and also do all we can. Like, it's not completely hopeless even with coral reefs. There is some new technologies that can be used to garden the coral reefs, which I think is really exciting.
I think with those two, at the surface, it's easy to, I guess it's not immediate how severe that is. So why is something like the coral reefs dying? So then that'll wipe out a coral fish. And then the other example that you mentioned just now, why do they matter? I guess why should people care and really take it to heart, really?
Yeah. Well, with melting ice, that's obviously going to contribute to sea level rise, and there's a lot of low-lying islands, like amazing, beautiful places around the world, which we might completely lose. But there's a time lag between the time that you pump the fossil pollution into the air and you see the impacts. So,
and I think that's the thing, right? It's that delayed gratification.
Yeah.
When there's an earthquake in Haiti and you see those images on TV, it's very easy to be compelled to act, and we're very good at doing that. Same with Grenfell, when the issues are very immediate and within our proximity of awareness, and those are the sounds and things that we're seeing and hearing as well. It's easier to do, but these are things that we're talking about. Well, this is really, really bad, but it's going to happen a little bit later on, and we're not quite sure when, but it is really bad. So we need to prepare for it now. And I think hopefully I'm on the right track here. That's part of the reason why it's difficult to get people to really buy into it and really get involved as much. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do think though that it's changing, and you can already see, people are starting to change their lifestyles, and there's a lot of renewable energy being stored all over the world. So I do think people are actually waking up.
And on the topic of renewable energy, what do you think is the way forward? You've got Elon Musk and electric cars. You've got wind farms generating electricity, tidal power, geothermal energy. Which one of those are going to be the future, do you think, or could be, and why haven't we seen it yet?
I think it's a bit of everything, and we are seeing it actually already. Like a lot of places there's a few countries around the world that are already 100% powered by renewable energy. Costa Rica is one, and some of them have a whole week, where it's purely renewable energy.
That's amazing.
So it's already happening really, and I think we need all the technologies we can. We won't necessarily know without trying all the different types of renewables.
Where would you say the UK is in that at the moment? How close are we?
So UK is doing okay, but probably compared to other European countries, it's not really doing that good.
Okay.
And we've still got a lot of gas, and basically we need more government policy to actually push us towards 100%.
And it's unfortunate that Theresa May, recently just got rid of the Department for Climate Change when she came into office.
Yeah, well, I guess that's more of a communications issue, that they got rid of a department that had climate change in the title, merged it with another department. But yeah, we've still got a lot of good policies in this country. We just have to make sure that things like Brexit don't distract us too much from all the great policies that we have in this country.
On that question, who are the role models? Who's kind of leading the pack and kind of modelling it for everyone else and doing really, really well in terms of their stuff?
I'd say Germany has some good policies on renewables. Denmark, there's a bunch of countries we can look all over the world, and China also is now producing a lot of renewable energy technology. Okay. So that's
and conversely, who would you say are the kind of the number one suspects when it comes to there's a lot of reform needed?
Well, I would still say it has to be America, to be honest, and Donald Trump has not helped the situation at all. But yeah, it's important not to get too pessimistic, because actually there's still a lot of US companies, businesses, investors,
and that was really interesting,
who are going green
as well. When he did come into power and he started to talk about climate change, and he wasn't as assertive as people wanted. There were I think there was a letter that a bunch of companies and people signed to say, well, our president might not say this, but we're saying it, and we're the people of America. So I agree with you there that, you know, he's so loud and orange that it's a bit of a distraction and kind of takes up all the attention. But actually there are lots of positive things happening as well in America right now. So I want to actually go to our next segment of the show. We're not going to do a social reform Fed of the week, actually. We're going to go straight to Build the Buzz, because this question was really, really interesting. And it's from Rodrigo. Thank you for the question. Remember, guys, if you have a question for one of our guests, make sure you leave it down in the comments below, either on this episode or on this topic, or any other kind of real life education topic that you want to learn about. We're changing themes, as you know, every month. And this month is all about climate change and human rights and global issues. So, and on that, actually, our next topic is going to be productivity and resilience. So if you've got a question on those, we've got some amazing guests that are going to be on the show. So make sure you leave your comments on that there. So back to the question. Rodrigo said, it's actually quite ignorant of many people to talk about helping to save the environment and not mention the enormous quantity of greenhouse gases the meat industry produces. Of course, it's also important to talk about this, but the meat industry actually produces more greenhouse gases than cars and households. Why doesn't this get more attention?
I think it's a really, really interesting question, and one that I've been thinking about a lot, actually. And it is really true that one of the biggest things you can do as an individual is to reduce your meat consumption. And that's just shown by a lot of scientific research that's come out. But I would say, though, that on a kind of industry or economy-wide basis, what the government can still do, I think they feel like they can't really do a lot on that topic, because it's up to individuals, it's up to people's choices about what they eat. So the government actually has more control over things like energy, things like transport. So they focus on those areas. But I think it's important for people to realise that they don't have to go the full way. If there's foods that they really enjoy that they're finding difficult to give up, even every little helps. So even just cutting down on your meat consumption slightly can make a big difference.
Yeah, and what I like about that is that it's a much kinder approach. I think often the criticism of a lot of vegans and vegetarians is that they're very self-righteous, and that can be very, I guess, intimidating and just turns people off. Because they believe that they're morally superior just because of their food choices. Now, you can be a vegan but still be a complete dick, mind my language. But you could also, be a meat eater and be a complete, amazing, incredible. But like people, exist in spectrums. And I was reading a couple of articles recently which talked about that's something that a lot of kind of pro-vegan vegetarian movements can learn from the growth of that demographic, is actually taking a much more pragmatic kind of approach to people's habits. There's studies that show it takes anywhere from 3 weeks to 9 months for you to change your habit of, just doing 10 push-ups a day. So to change something that you've been conditioned to believe that dairy is good for you, or that you need to have chicken with your chips, it's going to take time, and you don't need some self-righteous vegan or vegetarian or whoever telling you. But there are also, of course, some very, very credible arguments that are being made there, like the question that you put to us, Rodrigo. So, a really interesting topic there. I'm going to be enjoying my crosstown donuts later. So if you're a vegan and you're watching this and you're in London, definitely go check out their vegan options, because they are amazing. But we are out of time, and we are at the end of the show. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and leave your comments down below. I would love to know how many of you are vegan, vegetarian, lactose intolerant, gluten-free, straight up carnivores and love meat. What do you think about these topics? And also, what was the one thing that you got from the discussion today that you found most useful? And as always, Just like a bumblebee gathers pollen from different flowers, absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, and add what is uniquely and truly your own. This was episode 13. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.